Hello all, hope you're well. Rick here with a new Starship breakdown, and this one has a bit of a strange origin, the Olympic class. Originally conceived as the Hope class USS Olympic, the name was changed when it was rechristened the Pasteur for the show, and the former name became the class name. The inspiration for the vessel was clearly the Daedalus class, which Bill George confirmed. The original Daedalus was created by Matt Jeffries, but dismissed as an option for the Enterprise as it was too bulbous. The Olympic was designed simply to be a next-generation version of that older ship, and was built at home by George, but was not initially slated to appear in the episode. Instead, the script was looking for a smaller, sleeker vessel, but the usual process for selecting the design was bypassed when the finished model was presented, and instead was chosen to be the Pasteur. The design was approved because it looked, quote, stately and peaceful, perfect for a medical vessel. Witnessed in the Next Generation's finale of All Good Things, the USS Pasteur was from a future that never came to pass. When it came to the existence of this class, we could not take it as guaranteed. After all, we also saw the Galaxy-X, a refit version of the Galaxy class with the Enterprise D. But of course that vessel was eventually lost over Viridian 3, and we had the Enterprise F by this point in the Prime timeline. However, that is not to say the Galaxy refit program never went ahead, nor did it suggest that the USS Pasteur would never come to be. While there were references to it, it was not until its appearance in lower decks as the USS Quito, NCC 69117, in the mid-2370s that we got confirmation that the Olympic class did already exist out there in the fleet. The Quito is apocryphally described as being launched in 2372. In the lore of Star Trek Countdown, which is not applicable to the Prime timeline anymore either, several Olympic classes were dispatched to aid Romulus in 2387, and destroyed by the Narada out of Nero's misguided vengeance. But now we're getting into its lore, so let's take a look. The class is actually rather an old one, entering service in 2341, although other sources say 68. I'll genuinely use the stats from its end of service era, and I'm not going to use things from the anti-time future as too much of that did not come to pass. The primary shipyard was Utopia Planitia, with Denobula's Lagrange slips and Vulcan's Eridani A construction yards being other dry docks. The design premise for this vessel was to create a ship that could fulfill numerous science missions, such as survey, research, and medical response. It was, in essence, a very peaceful ship, and typified the humanitarian aspects of Starfleet, thus it was not to be heavily armed. This allowed it to enter into many more diplomatically sensitive areas than something like an Ambassador class or even Excelsior, both of which had reputations as powerful ships, even if that was not their primary role. However, thanks to their minimal armaments and peaceful demeanour, the Olympics were seldom sent on frontline exploratory missions, and instead reserved for known space, both within and beyond Federation borders. The main bridge is where you would expect, but many of the systems that would usually be found in the secondary hull are instead located in the sphere of the vessel. The spherical shape of the main hull demanded a different deflector design, and instead of a dish, the Olympic was made with a sort of grill instead. Running in bands around the surface were advanced sensor systems, at the time some of the most efficient in the fleet for the expected analyses that it would need to undertake. Of particular note is the underside of the main hull, which contained the planetary sensor dome and probe launcher. The secondary hull contained mostly labs and facilities for other scientific research and development. It was essentially a flying complex in the same vein as ships like the Crossfield before it, but larger and more capable than the smaller Oberth class. The ship was around 320 metres long, 120 wide and 125 tall, making it a rather modest size, yet that sphere design meant that there was a lot of internal volume to work with. Hence the standard crew size was around 750, but it could house up to 2,500 extra personnel. Usually these were non-Starfleet scientists and civilians who had signed on for specific missions or medical staff depending on the role of the vessel. On top of this, it could house up to 8,000 people in emergencies to function as an evacuation ship. The warp system was adequate for the time but seldom updated. It had no trouble cruising at warp 6 and could accelerate to warp 9.2 for 6 hours before emergency shutdown. This put it on par with the latest Ambassador-class vessels, which were numerous by this time. The main impulse engines were located on the neck and were very powerful but not very manoeuvrable. It was lightly armed, with only 3 phaser arrays and 2 torpedo launchers. These bare minimum weapons are still a part of Starfleet's kit, even on a science vessel, as most launchers also double as probe launchers, while phasers remain an incredibly versatile tool, more so than disruptors. It had a single rear shuttle bay that looked like it was almost added on as an afterthought on top. Clear access allowed for the rapid arrival and departure of ships up to runabout scale, a must-have if personal transfers were needed. Its standard was around 20 shuttlecraft, 1 runabout and 4 smaller shuttle pods. Below this was the cargo storage. It contained 3 computer cores, 2 linked in the main sphere for the primary ship operations and to manage the vast computing power needed to run most of its missions. But additionally, a tertiary core, along with the emergency power unit, were located in the secondary hull. This was dedicated for lab usage, so as not to compromise the main computer and also act as a backup if needed. Creating medical-only vessels was seen as a misuse of Starfleet medical staff in generations past, and it was preferred to assign teams to starships and facilities instead. With the rising threats of the Border Wars, the Borg and then the Dominion, Starfleet re-evaluated this stance, assigning some of the Olympic-class starships to pure healing roles. These had the Starfleet medical symbol plastered on their hull to readily identify them, and the strange silhouette already helped mark them as different from standard Starfleet fare. Internally, the labs and their myriad of equipment was swapped out for hospital gear, and all those secondary hull sections were now geared up for treatments. It could comfortably hold 500 people for intensive care, with another 500 in emergencies. Bear in mind, recovery turnaround in the 24th century is faster thanks to the tech available. Many of these ships were literal lifesavers in the Dominion War, shadowing fleets and hanging back to recover and accept the injured crews of battered ships to convalesce. Moving into the late 24th century, it looks like these ships are finally beginning to show their age, as we no longer see them around by the turn of the century. And that covers all we know of the Olympic class. Definitely Starfleet's most unassuming starship, and one that managed to do much to demonstrate the Federation's oft-preached message of scientific development and compassionate exploration. It's all very well to hear that coming from the bridge of a Galaxy class, but it is starships like this that actually demonstrates what Starfleet wants to prioritise. It might not be many people's favourite, but it is truly an impressive vessel in its role, and I want to see what replaces it moving on. Thanks for watching, I've been Rick and I'll see you later for another video. Until then, thanks again, and goodbye.